While we might have talked about 2 incredible episodes the last 2 days, we're going to be diving into a really, really beautiful episode, and the one that introduced Chuck as God. This is... Fan theories are wild. Anything that goes on for a decent amount of time is definitely going to create theories, ideas and concepts that are brought up by those who watch or read or even listen to a project. Ideas and concepts that could fill in little holes or expand the lore of an entire piece of art retroactively. Some fan theories are good. Some of them create entire worlds and piece together little information nuggets and deliver something so fascinating it makes the project better. Like a Souls game. Elden Ring doesn't really have a story, so to speak, but the world it takes place in is steeped in rich lore and beautiful hints of something far bigger than the player itself. Fans are able to take this information and turn it into something sprawling and epic. Something that improves the cool piece of art already. It transcends what it originally was, thanks to fan theories. With as long as Supernatural is, it definitely has several of these theories, but perhaps the most prevalent one was that the prophet Chuck Shurley, introduced in season 4, isn't a prophet after all. He's actually God. When it came time for Supernatural to up the stakes once more, they introduced us to the Darkness, a primordial force of terror that was around at the same time as God himself, often referred to as his sister. This introduction to the lore was fascinating, but it created a pretty large issue. Sam and Dean can't fight an evil god, at least not by themselves. They'd need help. Enter Chuck. I'm not sure if there's any confirmation that Eric Kripke or anyone involved in the show had intended for Chuck to be God prior to season 11, but by the time we arrived in season 11, the writers knew that this was the case. So then the question was, how do you execute it? Do we do a massive reveal, something that shakes up the core of the very foundation of Supernatural, or do we just do it? And well, Supernatural just did it. Don't Call Me Shurley opens with the distressed Metatron taken to a random bar with jovial music playing, and the only other person in attendance with him is Chuck Shurley. All it takes is one small scene between Chuck and Metatron before Chuck flippantly reveals, "Oh yeah, I'm God." I've always liked this reveal. There's actually a deleted scene that plays it much differently. It was pretty interesting to watch, but I prefer this way. It's in your face enough to not waste any time for those who already knew that Chuck was God, but it's done in such an abrupt and interesting way that allows for those who never considered the possibility to be shocked and in awe. The show gets around any hiccups that this might cause, though, by having the reveal to Sam and Dean be this massive, earth-shattering revelation, while to the audience it's just sort of a wink at the camera. To the characters and the universe, it's a fundamental worldview change that's going to take a few episodes to get around. And I think that's really, really cool. The whole way the episode is framed and plays out allows for such a brilliant reveal, and it's one of my personal favorite moments in the entire show. The scenes of Chuck playing guitar and singing while Sam and Dean and an entire town are about to die from the darkness's fog is haunting, but it's in the best way. I just love watching the two find their way on the street and Chuck is just standing there. The second best thing about this episode is, surprisingly, Metatron. What the hell? I hate Metatron. I was utterly surprised when I first watched this episode just how strong of a character Metatron actually was in it. He's a genuinely compelling look into angels and their relationships with God. Metatron's entire character was defined by a moment he said he and God shared. The moment when God entered the room of angels and chose Metatron to be his scribe. Metatron's entire rise to power was just a way to emulate God, to bring him back. But it didn't work, and now he's human and he's lost everything when he's finally able to see his beloved father again. For the first time in eons, he can see him, and all Chuck wants to do is write again. Once again picking Metatron to be his editor, and at the end of the day, Metatron learns the truth that he wasn't special. He was simply the angel closest to the door, simply the first one that Chuck chose, and all his deeds and all his acts made in a vain pursuit of emulating the father was for nothing. Metatron and Chuck go on a journey this episode. Chuck's writing his autobiography, and Metatron becomes a parallel for humanity, honestly, and the humans that reside within the Supernatural universe. Metatron pleads with Chuck to be more vulnerable, to open himself back up to his creations long after he's cast them aside, long after he's decided that they're not worth anything anymore. I think what makes this work is that Metatron has been such a terrible person for so long, and a villain who has done horrific acts. And this change isn't really a change, but it's the final pleading of someone who's all their life has just wanted to see their father again. Metatron's pleading isn't for Chuck to come back in the game and lock the darkness away. It's not to convince Chuck to become all-powerful once more and just save save the day with a snap of his fingers, but instead it's simply a plea for him to remember love, to remember compassion, to step back in and embrace the joy and love of his creation one last time, rather than toss it all aside out of fear of being hurt by his world again. The events in Hope Springs are the perfect mirror to Chuck's barroom debate with Metatron. On one side of the episode, we see people choking and dying in the streets, with humanity literally drowning in darkness. On the other, God is nursing a beer, wondering if it was even worth it to begin with. The contrast is brutal, and it works because it reminds us that the stakes aren't abstract. This isn't a cosmic chess match, it's about lives. Messy, fragile, ordinary human lives. The fog isn't just the darkness, though, at the end of the day. It does represent God's absence. The entire time, much like many characters in the show, the darkness is doing these things to get God's attention. When Chuck finally decides to act, it just feels necessary. The fog clears and it's a sigh of relief. Dean doesn't celebrate, Sam doesn't crack a joke, because the real battle hasn't begun. What makes the moment resonate is that it's framed as a promise. Chuck isn't swooping in to fix things, but he's finally standing up and owning them. His statement of, "We should probably talk" to Sam and Dean is a big moment because it's him owning up to his own creation. That's why this episode hits hard. It's not about the darkness of a villain, or even about the Winchester's latest apocalyptic scramble to save the world. It's about whether creation has value, whether humanity is worth the mess that it makes. And I think it's about why and if writing has value, if being an author of something makes sense, if you should care about the creations made. That question of God and humanity and faith has been running under the show since the first season. Whenever Sam prayed, or Dean cursed God's name, or an angel reminded them of prophecy. Don't Call Me Shurley finally takes that subtext and makes it blatant text. And that's the biggest question the show could possibly ask. Is this all meaningless, or is there still love at the heart of it? And this is where Supernatural has always had its biggest potential for me. Because if for all the filler, goofy one-offs, or arcs that don't land, sometimes the show pulls everything together and reminds you it has something to say. That this show is about faith and responsibility and the terrifying reality of being human in a world that doesn't guarantee answers. It's about flawed fathers and absent gods and children just making sense of it all. When Supernatural swings for meaning, it really hits like nothing else on TV. Don't Call Me Shurley isn't just a good twist episode, it's proof of concept for what the show can do when it stops running from its own questions. It tells us that God is real, yes, but more importantly, it tells us that God is fallible, tired, and maybe even scared. That doesn't make him less interesting, it makes it more human. Supernatural is a show that's always boiled down cosmic concepts into human lenses, and this time it's gone the most cosmic that it can, and the only way to balance that out is to go the most human that it can. Tomorrow we're going to be diving into another important episode about Chuck as God. We're going to be talking about Mariah, a controversial and divisive episode, but one that I've had a lot of respect for over the years.